Welcome to EconWorks. We live in an era of massive platforms, global supply chains, and unprecedented market concentration. But behind every headline about a merger or a legal settlement, there is a deeper mechanical struggle for control. On this show, we pull back the curtain on the invisible forces shaping our economy. We look past the talking points to examine where law, power, and markets actually collide, and how those collisions redefine the world we live in. Coming to you from the EconWorks desk, we're diving into a breakdown of the systems that run our modern life. This is EconWorks. Today's episode, Bundling the Ecosystem, how OS accessibility drives adoption.
You sit down at your computer, you open up a program, and well, you get to work. It feels entirely like your own decision. You chose to click that icon.
Well, exactly. It feels like free will.
Yeah. But what if the digital world you're interacting with was actually carefully arranged before you even touched the keyboard? What if the choices you think you're making were kind of predetermined by the architecture of the system itself?
It's a slightly unsettling thought, honestly.
It really is. So today, our mission is to unpack a really fascinating piece of analysis from the EconWorks FAing Antitrust series, and we are looking at exactly that, how that invisible architecture dictates the digital economy.
And it is just a phenomenal series to work through. I mean, the overarching theme of this research is about uncovering those hidden structures.
Right.
It looks past the marketing, past the brand loyalty, to examine the literal functional mechanics of how tech giants maintain their gravity. We are talking about the subtle, almost imperceptible ways that the layout of your screen decides which software wins and which software loses.
And just to give you some context on where we are in this journey, if you've been following our recent deep dives into this analysis, we've looked at how Google uses default agreements to influence search behavior. We explored Apple's App Store policies and how they shape developer access to your phone. We dove into Amazon's marketplace ranking systems. And most recently, we looked at Meta's feed ranking and how it allocates your attention.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. But today, the spotlight swings to Microsoft. We are looking at operating systems and specifically how operating system integration shapes competition in complementary software markets.
I know that sounds highly technical on the surface, operating system integration, complementary markets, but it fundamentally comes down to who controls the environment you work in. The foundation of this entire analysis begins with Windows. Microsoft develops and distributes the Windows operating system, which serves as the primary interface through which millions of users interact with software applications on personal computers. So Windows is like the air that the software breathes. It is the fundamental environment.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that is a massive concept to wrap our heads around. We are moving away from the idea of software companies just trying to build a better mousetrap, and moving into the idea of a company owning the entire house where the mouse lives.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. So let's establish what we actually mean when we talk about this environment, because Microsoft doesn't just build the operating system and then, walk away.
No, not at all. And that is the critical pivot in the research. In addition to the operating system itself, Microsoft also develops what economists call complementary software products. So they build the underlying infrastructure, but they also build the apps that run on top of it. We are talking about web browsers, productivity suites like word processors and spreadsheets, cloud storage services, and communication platforms.
So it's not just the roads. I mean, they own the cars, the gas stations, and the billboards along the highway.
Exactly.
And the crucial detail we are pulling from this analysis is how these complementary products exist within that Windows environment. They aren't just offered as options in an app store somewhere. They are pre-installed. They're integrated deep into the system, and they are prominently displayed the very moment you turn the machine on.
Yeah, they are right there waiting for you.
It makes me think of an analogy. It's like renting an apartment that already comes fully furnished.
Oh, I like that.
Right. You sign the lease, you walk in, and there's a couch in the living room, a bed in the bedroom, a microwave in the kitchen. Now, sure, you have the absolute freedom to go out, rent a moving truck, drive across town to a furniture store, spend your weekend buying a new couch, and haul it up 3 flights of stairs to your apartment.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. You can do that. But there is already a perfectly fine couch sitting right there in the living room. Most people, especially after a long day, are just going to sit on the couch that is already there.
What's fascinating here is that this analogy perfectly captures the strategic layer we're examining. Because Microsoft isn't simply competing head-to-head with independent developers purely on product features.
Right.
They aren't putting their couch in a showroom next to 10 other couches and asking you to judge the fabric or the spring tension. They are using their ownership of the operating system environment to influence how users access competing applications.
Wow.
Yeah, they are shaping the environment itself to ensure their couch is the one you see first, the one you bump into, and the one that requires literally zero effort to use.
And the analysis points out that this integration is a direct pipeline. Like you move from the software being integrated into the operating system to it having massive visibility, which translates directly into user adoption.
Yes.
It is entirely about shaping user behavior by shaping their initial exposure.
And that pipeline is everything in modern tech. Because once a piece of software is integrated into an operating system, it gains a monumental advantage simply due to its easy accessibility. But the research goes much deeper than just noting that the icon is on your desktop. It breaks down the very specific psychological and mechanical levers that are pulled to translate that presence into actual daily usage.
Let's talk about those levers. The adoption funnel. Because we are moving from the software just kind of sitting there in the background to how the system subtly forces the user's hand to actually engage with it.
Right, getting them to click.
Exactly. And the analysis points to Figure 2 from the Substack, which highlights 3 specific mechanisms: pre-installed software, default settings, and system prompts.
Those 3 mechanisms are the absolute engine of this entire strategy. I mean, pre-installation means it's already sitting on your hard drive. Default settings mean the computer automatically assumes you want to use it for specific tasks, like, opening a PDF or clicking a web link. And system prompts are those little dialog boxes that pop up asking you to confirm or change a setting, and they're often nudging you toward the integrated choice.
Okay, I need to push back on this, though.
Go for it.
I have to play the skeptic because I think a lot of people listening might be thinking the exact same thing right now. But wait, we all know how to download a different browser or app.
Sure.
I mean, we aren't helpless. Downloading an app takes maybe 30 seconds on a decent connection. If a pre-installed browser or a default chat app is genuinely terrible, won't people just take the time to switch?
You would think so.
Right. If I could just install an alternative, why do system prompts or default settings matter so much? I mean, we all know people who immediately download their preferred browser the second they buy a new computer. Does a little pop-up window really overrule free will? Are we giving these prompts too much credit?
It is a crucial question to ask, and understanding the answer is really the key to understanding digital monopolies in general. You are entirely right that for a highly technical user or someone with very specific, strongly held preferences, downloading an alternative is trivial.
Yeah, they don't even think about it.
Exactly. They will jump that hurdle. But the economic analysis isn't looking at the tech enthusiast. It is looking at market dynamics at scale. We are talking about hundreds of millions of users. And at that scale, human behavior is governed by the friction of choice.
The friction of choice. So the idea that any extra step, no matter how small it is, causes a certain percentage of people to just give up or take the easy route.
Precisely. The research argues that even where users technically can install alternative applications, the differences in accessibility directly and heavily influence downstream usage outcomes. Think about the cognitive load. Imagine you are working on a deadline, you click a link in an email, and a system prompt pops up. It says, "How do you want to open this?" The integrated browser is already highlighted. It might even have a little badge that says recommended for Windows.
Right, so the operating system, the very thing you trust to run your computer, is essentially telling you, hey, this is the safest, best way to do this.
Exactly. To proceed, you just have to click OK. It takes a fraction of a second. But to choose the alternative, you have to stop your workflow, read the options, actively select a different program, and perhaps navigate a warning screen or check a box that says, always use this app.
Yeah, it slows you down.
It introduces microfrictions. It introduces a tiny sliver of doubt like, what if I break something by changing the default? The strategy isn't about trapping the user in a locked room. It's about paving an incredibly smooth, brightly lit path of least resistance while leaving the path to the competitor unpaved and, slightly confusing.
And when you multiply that 3 seconds of confusion across a massive population, you guarantee a massive volume of adoption. It is purely a numbers game.
Just math.
You put that furnished couch in 100 million apartments, and yes, maybe 10 million power users will go buy their own couch. But that leaves 90 million people who are never going to bother. The integration alone secured you 90 million users before anyone even evaluated the quality of the product itself.
That is the exact dynamic. Integration within the OS environment drastically increases the likelihood of adoption. But that leads us to the most vital and, frankly, the most alarming part of this economic analysis.
Okay.
What happens after those 90 million people sit on the default couch? Because the story doesn't end with that initial adoption. That is just the catalyst for the snowball effect.
Yes, the feedback loop. This is the concept that really shifts the perspective for me. Because it means the initial advantage of being the default doesn't just stay a one-time bonus. It's not a static victory. It compounds over time.
The analysis lays out a very clear, really ruthless chain of causality. The adoption outcomes we just talked about, getting all those users simply because the software was the default trigger, a secondary set of market forces.
Right.
Massive user adoption directly influences three critical factors for any software. Those are compatibility investments, developer support, and third-party integrations.
Let's break down what that actually means in the real world. The analysis argues that applications that are widely adopted receive more updates, greater developer attention, and broader ecosystem compatibility.
Exactly.
Which inherently makes the product better, which then reinforces its attractiveness to users.
To understand the mechanism, you really have to put yourself in the shoes of a third-party software developer. Let's say you are running a startup and you're building a new project management tool.
Okay, I'm a startup founder.
Right. You have a small team, a tight budget, and limited time. You absolutely need your tool to integrate with a cloud storage service so your users can attach their files to their projects.
Right, you need those APIs to talk to each other so the user experience is seamless. Otherwise, people won't use it.
Exactly. But you only have the engineering resources to build an integration for one cloud storage provider right now. Which one are you going to spend your time integrating with? Are you going to build for the independent, incredibly innovative cloud service that has a passionate user base of maybe 50,000 people? Or are you going to build for the integrated default cloud service that has 100 million users because it came pre-installed on the operating system?
You go where the people are.
Yeah.
You have to. I mean,
Right.
If you build for the platform with 50,000 users, your startup goes bankrupt.
Yep.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like a restaurant that manages to get a lease in the absolute best location in the city, right next to the busiest subway terminal.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they get all that immediate guaranteed foot traffic, they make a ton of money. Because they make a ton of money, they can afford to hire a Michelin star chef, they buy higher quality ingredients, they redesign the dining room, and they stay open later. That makes the food genuinely better and the experience more enjoyable, which then makes it even more popular. The success literally feeds itself.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the feedback loop.
But the crucial thing to remember is that the initial spark wasn't that the food was the best on day one. They didn't win because they were the most innovative cooks.
No, they won because of the real estate.
Exactly. They won because they had the lease by the subway terminal. The location bought them the resources to eventually become a great restaurant.
And that is the exact cycle happening in the software market. Integration leads to initial mass adoption. That mass adoption dictates where the rest of the tech industry spends its time and money, leading to deep compatibility and widespread developer support. All of those third-party integrations make the product genuinely more useful and powerful, which naturally leads to even more adoption. The analysis states this perfectly adoption feedback reinforces initial integration advantages.
It creates a moat, a massive self-sustaining moat around the product. Once that feedback loop starts spinning, the software becomes completely entrenched.
It does.
And this is where we have to look at the other side of the coin. Because if the integrated software is caught in this massive upward feedback loop of success, what exactly is happening to the independent competitors? What is the reality for the people trying to build a better couch?
Well, this brings us to the entrance dilemma. And it is a steep, often insurmountable hill to climb. The analysis is very explicit about the chilling effect this has on innovation. It notes that for independent software developers trying to compete with integrated applications, the market dynamics work directly against them from day one.
Even if entry is technically feasible. Because yes, you can sit in your garage, write the code for a brand new, incredibly secure, blazing fast web browser and put it on the internet for people to download. There's literally no law stopping you.
Right, there's no barrier to simply existing.
But the headwinds you face are just brutal.
The pipeline for the independent entrant is the exact inverse of the integrated software. Because they aren't pre-installed, they suffered from critically low initial adoption. Because they have low adoption, they receive limited compatibility support.
It's a downward spiral.
Exactly. Because they have limited compatibility, they get reduced third-party integration. It just builds on itself in the wrong direction.
So what does this all mean for the little guy? Are they failing because their tech is bad or just because they aren't invited to the party?
That is the core issue the antitrust analysis is trying to highlight.
Yeah.
If we follow the economic logic, reduced early adoption fundamentally starves a new entrant of the resources they need to compete.
Mm-hmm.
If you launch a brilliant new communication platform, maybe it has revolutionary privacy features or a vastly superior interface, but you don't get that initial massive wave of users because you aren't the system default, you never trigger your own positive feedback loop.
You never get the momentum. You were just stuck at the starting line.
Precisely. Without that initial burst of adoption, independent developers won't get the attention of the broader tech ecosystem. Other companies won't build integrations for your platform because there just isn't enough financial incentive to do so.
Right. Why spend the money?
Exactly. Your software remains isolated. So an independent product might technically be vastly superior in its core function, but because it lacks the broad ecosystem compatibility that comes from mass adoption, it becomes practically less useful to the end user.
The entrant is starved of the very oxygen needed to survive in the software market, which is network effects. You can build the most beautiful high-tech telephone in the world, but if it only connects to 5 other people, it's essentially a paperweight.
That's spot on.
They just can't get the traction. The megaphone is on, they're shouting about their innovation, but there's no one in the room to hear it because everyone is hanging out in the fully furnished apartment next door using the default microwave.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is really the philosophical core of the entire EconWorks analysis. We started by looking at a specific company, Microsoft, and specific mundane actions like pre-installing a browser or setting a default cloud drive.
Yeah.
But the implications alter how we define competition itself in the digital age.
It really is a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
I mean, we are culturally conditioned to believe in a pure meritocracy of products.
Mm-hmm.
We think the best product naturally rises to the top and wins the market.
Right. The cream rises.
Exactly.
Mm.
But this analysis suggests something entirely different. It suggests the best placed product wins. It concludes that competition in software markets depends not only on the quality of the code you write, but on how the underlying operating systems shape the accessibility of your application.
And this raises an important question, and it's the exact question the research leaves us grappling with at the end of the analysis. Should platform operators be permitted to influence adoption through integration?
That's the million-dollar question.
Think about it as infrastructure. If the operating system is the essential infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the highways of the digital world, should the company that owns those roads be allowed to put massive, unavoidable billboards for their own businesses right in the middle of your commute, while independent businesses are hidden down a dirt road behind a toll booth?
It becomes a debate between fairness and convenience. Because as a user, having everything pre-installed, pre-configured, and working together smoothly out of the box is incredibly convenient.
Oh, absolutely.
You open the laptop and it just works. But the cost of that convenience is entirely invisible to the person typing on the keyboard.
And that is the tension regulators and economists are trying to navigate. The immediate efficiency of an integrated walled garden ecosystem versus the long-term dynamic innovation of a fiercely competitive open market. By shaping the adoption patterns from the very first click, the platform operator isn't just winning a competitive race. They're designing the track so that they start 10 inches from the finish line, while everyone else is still, lacing up their shoes.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, why does this intricate economic theory matter to your daily life? Why should you care about adoption funnels and compatibility loops?
Because you are the mechanism.
Exactly. The next time you boot up a new computer, or your current machine runs a major system update, pay close attention to what happens on your screen. When a prompt pops up asking if you want to use the recommended settings, or when a file automatically attempts to save to a default cloud drive you barely remember setting up, you aren't just clicking OK on a helpful suggestion.
You are witnessing the invisible economic machinery at work. You are becoming a data point in that massive adoption funnel that dictates which software gets developer support and which software slowly starves. You are participating in the feedback loop.
You are the foot traffic walking past that restaurant. And it leaves me thinking about that furnished apartment analogy again. We accept the couch that is given to us because it is easy, it is functional, it requires no thought.
Right.
But if convenience, default settings, and operating system integration dictate the winners of the tech industry rather than pure, unadulterated innovation,
Oh.
what incredible game-changing software are we, the users, missing out on right now simply because it wasn't pre-installed on our screens? What brilliant ideas, what revolutionary ways of interacting with our technology died quietly in a garage because they couldn't overcome the friction of that first click?
It genuinely makes you wonder what your digital life and the tools you use every single day would look like if you had to consciously build that environment from scratch.
It really does. Next time you sit down at your keyboard, remember, the choices have already been made for you. It is up to you to recognize them. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Econ Works. The goal of this series is to move beyond the surface-level descriptions of how markets work and start looking at the actual architecture of competition. We'll be back soon with another look at where the law and economics meet the market. For the full technical analysis and more from this series, visit us at econworks.com. If you found today's breakdown valuable, please subscribe and share the show. It helps us keep the analysis independent. From all of us here at Econ Works, thanks for listening.